Welcome to the first in a series of presentations on the history of Rouge Park. This presentation will cover the history from the very beginnings of the idea of Rouge Park in 1918 through the first 8 tumultuous years as Detroit went through 6 mayors, 3 parks commissioners, and countless controversies leading up to the unofficial opening and beginning of the development of the park in 1926. The bulk of information in this presentation is the result of the many hours spent by the Friends of Rouge Park History Committee combing through newspaper archives and a photo scrapbook compiled by the city's Parks Department from 1919 to 1935. We will begin by traveling back in time to Detroit in 1918, when the U.S. was fighting World War I. Detroit was deeply involved in the war effort, and by the time it ended in November of 1918, 5,000 Detroiters had died. The temperance movement was in full swing, as was the fight for women's suffrage. Just 2 years later, women would gain the right to vote and prohibition would begin. Detroit was also in the grip of a worldwide pandemic that began in the spring of 1918. Those masks look familiar, don't they? Despite these challenges, Detroit's economy was booming with its burgeoning automobile industry. In 1918, half of all the cars on the road in the U.S. were Model Ts made at the Highland Park plant, and the Ford Rouge plant was under construction. The population of Detroit doubled from 446,000 in 1910 to over 1 million by 1920. The city was rapidly expanding, and residential and commercial developments were gobbling up land faster than city planners could set aside land for public parks. In the late teens, newspaper articles like this one began to appear lamenting the lack of, quote, breathing spots in the growing city. As it states in this article, quote, a city must have recreation, and what greater recreation is there than an evening or Sunday spent in the open with nature? And so, the story of Rouge Park truly begins in 1918 with the dreams of the Commissioner of Parks and Boulevards at the time, William T. Dust. Dust was born in Germany in 1853. His family moved to Detroit when he was 4 years old. He left school at age 13 during the Civil War to work at the Calvert Lithography Company, where he worked for 20 years before starting his own company, the William T. Dust Company, that manufactured, repaired, and installed stoves and furnaces. He was involved in city government beginning in 1884, serving first on the city council, then as city clerk, and several other positions before being elected to the State House of Representatives in 1906. In 1913, he was appointed Parks Commissioner by the newly elected mayor, Oscar Marks. Dust was an outspoken proponent of the value of parks, and according to his biography, quote, his efforts for the public good have been far-reaching and resultant, and many tangible evidences of his devotion to city and state may be cited, end quote. Certainly one of those tangible evidences was his idea of creating Rouge Park. We can imagine Mr. Dust at the age of 65, nearing retirement, and his staff, all wearing their masks, driving along the dirt roads just beyond the edge of the city, lamenting the feverish pace of development and stopping to take notes of parcels of land that may be favorable for our future park. Then we can imagine him traveling farther out into the hinterlands to explore a site for a larger, more distinctive park that could one day be Detroit's landmark park, like Central Park is to New York, or Golden Gate Park is to San Francisco. His explorations led him to the Rouge River in rural Dearborn Township, where he came upon an especially beautiful stretch of land along the river south of the Pere Marquette Railroad. He added this parcel to his list. He advocated for city council approval for placing a $10 million parks bond proposal on the upcoming April 7, 1919 ballot, arguing that the city had the least parkland of any large city and was wealthy enough to afford expanding and improving our parks. The article states, quote, He declared this city to be the fourth lowest in the amount of municipal indebtedness and had the smallest amount of park area of any large city in the country, end quote. The City Council put the proposition on the ballot, second to the last one on the slide in the right column, and it passed at the April 7th election. Just 3 months later, on July 1st, 1919, and before he could spend a single dollar of the $10 million, William Dust retired and was replaced by 42-year-old Colonel Edward G. Heckel, who had just returned as a B-medaled hero at the end of World War I. Heckel is the tallest man in the center of the photo. An interesting footnote is that, according to a biography I found online, William Dust, immediately after retiring, organized the Citizens Building and Realty Company, of which he was president. So perhaps his main goal was to profit off selling high-priced land adjacent to the parks he sought to fund, rather than in a deeper value of creating breathing spots for the masses. But who knows? Anyway, Heckel did adopt Dust's exuberance for developing new parks in Detroit and invited the new Detroit mayor, elected in January 1919, James Couzens, on a tour of the Rouge Park site before an upcoming vote of the City Council. According to this article, Couzens was, quote, highly enthusiastic over the possibilities offered by the site, end quote, and endorsed the plan. And just 4 days later, on September 16, 1919, the City Council approved the plan. Now, I think it's important here to understand just how forward-thinking these leaders were in choosing this site for a park. In 1919, you would have to drive 6 miles in your Model T from the outskirts of the city, that's 11 miles from City Hall, along rough dirt roads through the farms of Springwells, Greenfield, Dearborn Townships, and the German farming village of Warrendale to get to the river site. They had the foresight to understand that Detroit would one day expand out this far, and that a major landmark park such as this would be essential to the quality of life of its future residents. Let's take a closer look at the area that would become Rouge Park. The first Europeans arrived to settle this area 100 years earlier in the 1820s and had long ago logged the old-growth forests and tilled the native prairies. Before the Civil War, this area, besides a forested river floodplain where one can still find 250-year-old oaks, had all been converted to farmland. This map shows the landowners in the area in 1915. Each little black dot is a farmstead. And here is the outline of what would one day become Rouge Park. Fortunately, the Department of Parks and Boulevards kept a scrapbook of photos of Rouge Park from before it was acquired by the city in 1919 until 1935. Here are some photos of farming on the land from 1919. The photo descriptions list the main crops grown as wheat and oats. Here is a photo of the river from 1919. Notice the vegetation growing right to the edge of the river. You will never see that today in Rouge Park, since urban development throughout the Rouge River watershed since that time causes much more erosion to the banks every time it rains. Here is a farm stand that was located on the northeast corner of Plymouth Road and Outer Drive, then named Lamphere Road. They didn't only grow grains in Rouge Park, however. Here is a vineyard located west of the river, north of Plymouth, and what would later become the golf course. You can see from the notes with this photo that this area was being proposed for a natural amphitheater. I believe this is either south of Plymouth between the river and Rouge Park Drive, or possibly south of Joy Road between the river and Outer Drive, where the 106th Cavalry, then stationed in Rouge Park, would hold horse shows in the 1930s. But that's a story for the next presentation. Here is another proposed natural amphitheater. Does anyone recognize this location? It is located north of what is now the Buffalo Soldiers Horse Barn and west of Spinoza Drive. It would later become a popular winter sports area with an ice skating rink and toboggan slides about 10 years after this photo was taken. But at this time, there was no Outer Drive, or Rouge Park Drive, or Spinoza Drive. The only roads going through the park were Plymouth Road, Bonaparte Road, later rerouted and renamed Joy Road, and Lazar Road. Today, Lazar runs from Joy Road, north past the Buffalo Soldiers Barn, and down the hill past the Lazar Marsh and ends at the river. The road used to cross the river and continue north to Plymouth Road, where it ended. We don't know what the road was named at that time. Warren Avenue, in the very bottom right-hand corner of this map, at that time extended to just past where Pearson Street is today at the east edge of the park and then turned southwest. This map is from 1876, but there were no changes to these roads from then until 1915. Okay, back to the Rouge Park story. Another important person in the development of Rouge Park was Dr. C.B. Lundy, Superintendent of the Recreation Commission. He was another strong advocate for parks. On July 25, 1919, an article in the Grand Rapids Press stated that, quote, 100 new playgrounds averaging an acre in size will be added to the city's recreational facilities within a year if the council approves the plans of Dr. C.B. Lundy, end quote. In the article on the right, he announced that the park could open, in part at least, by the spring of 1920. However, as we will soon learn, Lundy's optimism was misplaced. Several landowners opposed the condemnation of the land for Rouge Park, and in early 1920, several farmers took the city to court to challenge the law allowing the condemnation of their property for park purposes. This would tie up the purchase of the land for years to come. But that wasn't the only obstacle. The second challenge to the park came in 1921, when Councilman John C. Nagel became a strong proponent of building the Detroit Zoo at the Rouge Park location. Nagel was hired as a tax assessor for the city of Detroit in 1908, and according to the Night Train to Detroit online blog, developed a reputation as a, quote, dogged tax assessor driven by a single-minded obsession for increasing the taxable value of property in Detroit, end quote. He was an outspoken promoter of the Motor City and a, quote, staunch opponent of prohibition, and complained loudly that downtown Detroit's churches, which occupied valuable real estate in the growing business district, paid no taxes. By the end of his second term of service in 1914, Nagel had added $87 million to the city's assessment rolls and took credit for improving home values in neighborhoods that had previously been plagued by dereliction and disrepair. He was elected to city council in 1919 and served until 1928. Then again, he served from 1930 to 32. Regarding the zoo issue, he argued that since Detroit would pay 90% of the costs for the new zoo, it should be located in Detroit, where it would benefit from the tax revenues it would create. And while the controversy raged, all the park development plans went on hold. And notice the negative tone of the article on the right. Apparently, the Detroit Free Press preferred the Woodward location, since every single article written in the Free Press strongly opposed the Rouge Park location for the zoo. Finally, though, a year later, the issue was resolved when two proposals for a new Detroit Zoo, one for the Rouge Park location and one for the Woodward location, went on the ballot for the September 1922 elections. And as we all know, the zoo ended up on Woodward. As you can see on the right, the vote for the Woodward location was 45,174 yes to 31,521 no, and for the Rouge Park location, it was 23,056 yes to 55,398 no. Even though his plan for a zoo failed, Nagel went on to become one of the most outspoken supporters of the development of Rouge Park for the rest of his time on the council, and today, an historical plaque is located at the Brennan Pools recognizing his accomplishments. It reads, "Next to life, he loved his city best. For 25 years, he served it faithfully and well. His aid in establishing this beautiful park was the crowning achievement of his civic career. We hold him in grateful memory." Now that the zoo controversy was over, plans could finally move forward again for the development of Rouge Park. However, by September 1922, only half of the property owners had been served their summons for the condemnation of their property. And in December 1922, over 3 years after he endorsed the proposal for the park, James Couzens resigned to accept an appointment to the U.S. Senate without seeing the development of Rouge Park even begin. While Rouge Park was in limbo over the zoo issue and the court fights over condemnation, Parks Commissioner Heckel turned his attention toward another major project for Detroit that he could make progress on, an outer drive that would one day run from Grosse Pointe to, and I quote from the article, "the beautiful tract known as River Rouge Park, and which the city hopes soon may be converted into a municipal breathing spot." In 1923, the condemnation lawsuits were finally settled, and condemnation began under acting mayor John C. Lodge, who filled in after Couzens' resignation until Detroit elected Frank Doremus as its new mayor on April 9, 1923. Here is a list of the 26 landowners and the amounts they received for their property. The final cost was $1,246,192 for 1,203 acres. Notice the last entry for Charles Sorensen's property. Charles Sorensen was then the superintendent of the Ford Rouge plant. We'll talk more in the next presentation about him and his estate that was kept as a park recreation center for the next 60 years. But it is interesting to note from this article in June of 1923 that Sorensen wasn't too happy about picnickers, quote, "strewing his lawn with boxes, papers, half-eaten sandwiches, and bits of pickle," end quote. I guess litter problems in Rouge Park have a long history. In February 1924, buried in this article on the Belle Isle Zoo in the Detroit Free Press was a mention that the first playground in Rouge Park had been built. We don't know where it was, but I suspect it was at the south end of the park, possibly near this area known as the picnic grounds, north of the Sorensen House and east of the river where the abandoned Comfort Station is now. In the early 1920s, the south end of the park was the least farmed and most forested part of the park. That is why, to this day, we find the greatest diversity of native woodland wildflowers there. In spring 1924, this article appeared with Park Commissioner Heckel announcing that the park will open in 60 days. That would make the official opening day of the park July 24, 1924. However, it was not to be. By late summer 1924, it was reported that Rouge Park was finally under development and that topographical surveys had begun, and quote, "provision for the development of the park will be made in the 1925 budget of the Parks Department," end quote. It's interesting to note that this article also says that a train station may be added at the north end of the park to bring picnickers from Detroit, and that the park is, quote, "now open to the public and is being used by large crowds on the weekends and is being reached by bus service out Warren Avenue." But despite what this reporter wrote, the city had not yet announced the opening of the park. But at least it looked now like Rouge Park was finally going to get money for development in the 1925 budget. Oh, but not so fast. On November 21st, 1924, John W. Smith defeated John C. Lodge to be elected mayor. He did not share John C. Lodge, Edward Heckel, or John Nagel's value of parks. In the article on the left, it was reported that Heckel asked for $600,000 with which to improve River Rouge Park, and I quote from the article, "The budget hearings being conducted by Mayor John Smith were marked Friday by verbal clashes between the mayor and General Edward G. Heckel, Commissioner of Parks and Boulevards. Mayor Smith slashed practically every request made for improvements in the various parks," end quote. So the development of Rouge Park was again delayed, this time for ideological, not financial reasons, since the city's coffers were clearly overflowing with money from the $10 million bond. In 1926, the cuts continued, but this time cuts to the proposed Rouge Park golf course were spared. The article reads, "Golf course okayed. An item of $36,000 for a golf course in the Rouge Park was allowed to stand, however, after the mayor had ordered its elimination." Quote, "We'd better put that back in the budget," Mayor Smith said. "John Nagel will have it reinstated anyhow when it reaches the council," end quote. It goes on to say, quote, "John Nagel is one of the most enthusiastic champions of the huge West Side Park and has vigorously fought any attempt to retard its rapid development." Now you see how he earned that plaque. But just think, if John C. Lodge had won that election, Rouge Park could look very different today. During this same period, there was a campaign underway by Detroit to annex over 13 square miles on the west side of Detroit, including Rouge Park, parts of Greenfield, Redford, and Dearborn Township, including Warrendale that had just incorporated as a village 5 months earlier on September 9, 1924. The area to be annexed was bounded by the Pere Marquette Railroad on the north and Myers and Greenfield on the east. Here's Myers, West Chicago, and Greenfield. And then the current Detroit city limits on the south and the west side. The vote was held on April 6, 1925, and on that day, Rouge Park, Warrendale, and what would later become the Far West Detroit Civic Association, West Outer Drive Civic Association, Weatherby, and Franklin Park neighborhoods all became part of Detroit. And if anyone is wondering why the annexation took place, they spell it out very clearly here. Quote, "The question of annexing this section of territory surrounding Detroit is to eliminate the possibility of separate municipalities springing up about the city, like Warrendale just did, which would receive all the major benefits from the parent city without material support, read taxes, from those municipalities." As you can see, it passed 11,598 to 4,958. 1925 was also the year that the first design for the development of Rouge Park was released by the city. In the fine print of this document, there are two names of importance: T. Glenn Phillips, consultant, and Wilbur McGehee, designer. T. Glenn Phillips was born in 1877 and graduated as a landscape architect in 1902 from the Michigan Agricultural College, now MSU. Phillips Hall on the MSU campus is named in his honor. He began his career with the U.S. Bureau of Forestry and later formed his own landscape architecture business. He served on the Detroit City Plan and Improvement Commission from 1909 to 1919, and later as a consultant to the commission. His biography states, quote, "Phillips had a particular interest in planning subdivisions where he combined the landscape architect's interest in the development of the individual home and the preservation of natural beauty with the city planner's concern for a workable and orderly community." He designed the Henry Ford House Gardens and the campuses of MSU, Sacred Heart Seminary, University of Detroit, and the now historic Seminole Hills subdivision in Pontiac. McGehee was born in 1895 in Illinois and graduated from the University of Illinois in 1921 with a degree in landscape gardening. While this 29-year-old, barely 4 years out of college, signed this document as the designer of Rouge Park, T. Glenn Phillips certainly had a heavy hand in the design. Let's take a closer look at this document. We are looking at the area of the park north of Plymouth Road and the plan for the future golf course. Notice the plan for Rouge Park Drive running north from Plymouth Road and turning west to meet Outer Drive. This part right here. But notice that originally they planned to have it continue on, turning east and paralleling the river all the way to Burt Road. Remember the mention of the possibility of adding a train station to bring picnickers from Detroit? The text in the key to the left calls for a picnic, woods, and lake and playground right here. That never materialized. Oh, and just so you know, here is McGee's signature just below and to the left of where it says City Plan Commission in tiny writing. Now we are looking at the area below Plymouth Road. You see that the Brennan Pools, tennis courts, driving range, tree nursery, and roads are all pretty much as they look today. But notice the amphitheater planned for the area just south of Plymouth and west of the river. This area is now a forested wetland sporting a large great blue heron rookery. Moving down now to the area just north of Joy Road, we see the elimination of the Buffalo Soldiers horse barn. So glad that didn't happen. Though barns remain on the west side of Lazar, where the observation tower hill is now located. And Lazar has been shortened and ends at the top of the hill instead of descending down to the Lazar Marsh and ending at the river as it does today. The Lazar Bridge appears to still be there, but only used for foot traffic. And note the large polo field proposed for the area to the east of the Buffalo Soldiers barn. They boasted that this would be America's only polo field. Other than these differences, this area is pretty recognizable today. Now let's look south of Joy Road. While the roads are recognizable, the southeast corner of Joy and Spinoza certainly is not. According to the key, this area was proposed to be the, quote, formal section of the park. And zoomed in a little closer, with north to the right, we can see a casino and a conservatory, similar to the ones on Belle Isle, as well as formal gardens and a music court, and even a bus station over here. Looking at the southernmost section of the park, north of Warren Avenue, it is much less recognizable. We see a road was planned crossing the river near the Sorensen Mansion, right here, and connecting with Outer Drive. Sally and I have done some exploring in this area and found remnants of a road with concrete culverts dated in the 1920s placed beneath it. Was the road ever completed? It was certainly never paved. Also, we see a refectory right here and a dance pavilion planned on Outer Drive just north of this road. And also notice Bush Meadows west of Outer Drive, no doubt named after Henry W. Bush, who had been appointed Parks Commissioner just 3 months earlier. Now let's look at an excerpt from the descriptive text likely written by T. Glenn Phillips himself. Quote, this tract of land in its general character presents a very pleasing effect of pastoral landscape. The atmosphere of quiet and peacefulness that gives this character has been represented in pictures by many great artists. Some examples are The Greenwood, Summer Silence, Autumn Oaks, and Peaceful Vale by George Inness. This painting here is Autumn Oaks. It goes on later to say, along driveways that will give sights of long sweeping views across broad acres of meadows with soft boundaries of distant forest trees. The purpose of the design has been to preserve a beautiful natural environment, free from the rush and the sight of man's dominating influence. Here is to be preserved a natural landscape. Certainly at that time, it was pretty easy to preserve a beautiful natural landscape. Remember, as Detroit doubled in population and tripled in land size through several annexations in the 1920s, Rouge Park was still in a remote rural area miles from the streets of Detroit. Here is a map showing the extent of the urbanized area in 1925 and how far out in the rural area Rouge Park was when these words were written. Certainly Phillips would be disappointed today to see the, quote, rush and sight of man's dominating influence in the park, as by far the most common visitor today to Rouge Park is a driver using the park as a shortcut across town, driving at 40 miles an hour down our 25-mile-an-hour roads, all too often tossing trash out of their window. The view today of the edges of the park is mostly a hard boundary of homes, streets, and traffic, not the, quote, soft boundaries of distant forest trees that Phillips intended, though our current master plan does seek to address this. But we'll save that discussion for our next presentation in January on the master plan. Remember Busch Gardens in the plan? In May 1925, 3 months before the completion of the plan, and 3 months after his budget battle with Mayor Smith over the funds for Rouge Park, Edward Heckel was removed by Mayor Smith, and Henry W. Bush was promoted to Parks Commissioner after serving 20 years as the superintendent of the department. In the spring of 1926, Bush wrote this article proclaiming that Rouge Park, forever opening soon, will be Detroit's finest. So as of spring 1926, we know that Rouge Park had still not officially opened, though development did finally begin. Let's take a look at some photos from the scrapbook from this time in Rouge Park. Here is a commercial raspberry patch in 1925 located on the northeast corner of Plymouth and Outer Drive, named Lamphere at that time. A water tower would be built soon after at this location. And this could be almost anywhere in the park. Even though the farmers no longer owned the land, apparently they were allowed to continue their farming through the years of delay in development. Here they are harvesting oats. Here they are cutting wheat on the Sorensen farm north of Warren Avenue. See, 25 acres and 450 bushels. And did you know there was an attempt to change the name of Rouge Park to Marquette Park in 1925? After the Marquette Park Association, a group of residential developers pushing an ambitious plan to develop the entire area from Rouge Park to the city of Plymouth, and name this new city Marquette Park as well. This wasn't the last attempt to change the name of the park, but that's for a future presentation. Mayor Smith never approved the $600,000 that Heckel requested for Rouge Park in early 1925, but at least Bush succeeded in squeezing $67,000 from his administration for the park, $36,000 for the golf course, and the rest for laying sewer lines and beginning the development of roads. Here the caption of the photo reads, "Showing fill for Outer Drive." This photo was taken north of Plymouth in July 1926. Though I suspect this is actually what was later named Rouge Park Drive. Apparently, they decided not to build the connector east to Burt Road that we saw in the 1925 plan. Here is the excavating for the Outer Drive Bridge in August 1926. And here is work beginning on Bonaparte Road, west of the river in August 1926. And while all this construction was going on in the park, Mayor Smith did support one other project for the park, perhaps only because he could keep the costs low by using 300 to 400 prisoners as free prison slave labor. The plan was to pave 100 acres in Scout Hollow in concrete and build a dam to flood it to create an artificial lake for swimming and boating. We still need to do more research on why this project never materialized, but this is one project I think we are all grateful did not come to fruition. By September 1926, they had finished filling and leveling Rouge Park Drive north of Plymouth, and were now working south of Plymouth. Also in the summer of 1926, they began converting the Sorensen Mansion into a casino, which really meant a multi-purpose community center, not a gambling casino, which included adding an addition to the east side of the building. And here is Rouge Park Drive, south of Plymouth, ready for paving. And near the close of 1926, they had made great progress on the Outer Drive Bridge, though neither Outer Drive nor Joy Road were completed. And here we will close with another photo from 1926 showing the grading of Rouge Park Drive further south by horse and plow. I would like to thank the other members of the Friends of Rouge Park History Committee, Jim Westfall, Fred McKinder, and Heather Koch for their help in researching information for this presentation. And I also want to thank Juliana Fulton, Park Planner for the City of Detroit General Services Department, for sharing the city's Rouge Park scrapbook with us. Our History Committee could use more help, so if you are interested in joining our committee, or if you have historical photographs, historical items, or interesting stories you're willing to share with us from any time in Rouge Park's history, please send us an email at rougepark@gmail.com. We want to tell the whole story of Rouge Park. Thank you for watching, and please consider joining the Friends of Rouge Park. It's only $5 a year to stay informed and involved in the future of Detroit's finest park.